Hey everybody, it's Marty Hosking with Keller Williams, Greater Omaha, and back here with you for a little chat on all things real estate. Thanks for joining me, and thank you all of you who have sent out comments and such and feedback on this little video blog. I love that, and I love the questions. The more challenging, the better. But today we're going to talk about appraisals. Some of you have heard about appraisals. They are the instrument that the bank uses when someone is buying a house to verify that the value of the house will match the contract or agreed upon price between the buyer and the seller. So even if the buyer wants to offer $1 million for that $250,000 house, it may not be that the seller is going to get $1 million for that house, because if buyer's using a mortgage, then it's going to be limited by the appraisal. The good news is that appraisals serve a really nice purpose in our market to make sure that values don't get overinflated, and that the buyer is protected. In this case, the buyer is protected from overpaying for the house. What's really fun is when we have a competitive market right now, which it certainly is in favor of the seller. Even as I represent sellers, we can use the appraisal to our advantage as well, and know how to utilize it to make sure that everything goes smoothly. I think more than one seller will say that they're the ones most nervous about the appraisal. The buyer isn't as nervous. Why? Because the buyer knows that that's a nice instrument to make sure that they're not overpaying. And I would say 9 times out of 10, the seller, if the appraisal comes in lower than the contract price, 9 times out of 10, the seller will agree to lower the price down to the value that the appraiser places on the house, and both buyer and seller then agree and will continue. Most contracts, if you're smart, you'll make sure you have in your contract, you want to have a clause that states that this contract this contract is contingent upon or reliant upon an appraisal coming out at the contract price or more, but not less. If it comes in less, then if you make sure you have that clause in your contract, I don't care where you are in the country, you have to have some sort of clause that states that if it comes in for less than the contract price, you as the buyer are not obligated to make up the difference to the agreed upon. Because remember, the buyer and seller agreed on a price. Does the seller really care where the money comes from? Not really. So it's important for the buyer to make sure that they say to the seller, I'm getting it from a mortgage, and I'm going to have the bank agree on this price, or else I won't be able to buy it. I'm not going to make up that difference. And you may also, Mr. Seller, you may cancel the contract as well. Both parties can cancel it. This is a clause you must have in your on the buy side and when you're writing your contract. But on the selling side, on the listing side, when I'm working with sellers, we've got to make sure that that we protect the value of that house. We make sure we price it properly. We make sure that it has the value components that it needs to make sure that it does appraise. And so one of the things that I do with all of my listings, and you might make a little note of this because not everybody does, but I've learned, and I learned the hard way early on, it's really important to help the appraisers in their jobs. They have a very big job ahead of them, and right now they're extremely busy. It's a big chore, a big job to try to assess the value of a house. And I feel that it's our duty, my duty as a listing agent, to help the sellers, help the appraiser, so that it does appraise at what buyer and seller agree to pay. Of course, this is a benefit to the seller, because the seller then gets to have every penny of the money that the buyer is willing to pay, and they don't have to renegotiate it or lower their price. So on the listing side, what we'll do is I'll actually meet the appraiser at the property. So take that lockbox off so they can't sneak in there. Any appraisers listening, you know what I'm talking about. But I do really like to meet the appraiser. I think I want to make it easy for them. So I get the keys, I get them into the house or the condo without any problems. They can just breeze right in and then do their job. And typically I will give them a packet of information of what I've learned, because every property I learn a lot about it, and I want to make sure that the appraiser is up to speed on all the value components of your house, of the house I'm listing, and so that they can give a really true appraisal that takes into account all of the value components of the house, the neighborhood, the area, the history of the house, and even to try to tell them if it got multiple bids and that there's a strong pressure to support that price or higher. So that's kind of how we handle the appraisals. One of the cool tricks, if you're a buyer, and I know it's really strategic. You have to be strategic out there right now. Last weekend, a house that we had on the market in the 200s, it got 14 offers. So what do you think was a major component in that? The offers were good. The price, they were willing to offer full price and, of course, way over price on their escalation clauses and all of that. And we'll talk about escalation clauses as a strategy later, but what the smart agents used, and that and many of them did, they used the appraisal support. I call it appraisal support. So they made their offers up to a certain price, and they said, if the appraisal comes in a little bit lower, my buyer is willing to make up that difference for you in cash at closing. So that takes a little bit of the risk or the fear that the seller might have in taking a higher offer. So sure enough, it worked. One of our offers had a $6,000 appraisal support. So the buyer was willing to pay $600 cash out of pocket if that appraisal comes in $6,000 lower than up to $6,000 lower than the contract price. Seller was very excited to sign that, and then now we're going to see if the appraisal comes in, and we'll see what difference the buyer may have to make up. But it gives a lot of confidence to the seller, and it gives the buyer then the opportunity to have a little leg up on the other offer. So I hope you can use some of these tricks of the trade here and understand a little more process of appraisals. If you have any questions, give me a call. I'd love to talk more about it. It's fun to share that information, and if you have any challenges to me or anything that I didn't think about, I'd be glad to hear about them. Okay, well, everybody stay safe out there. Get your shots, and if you're in a cold climate like I am, get the shovel out. There's just a few more weeks left. Thanks for joining me. See you next time.